it was the picture the other day of make me a hard-boiled egg, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh boy, this is gonna be
Yeah, the irony of
yeah.
that was 8 months ago now. Uh, but so on that theme, what you're referencing is an Instagram post I did where I took a photo of me and Kendra, and she had COVID and I did not.
Yeah.
And I was laughing and having a great time. She was super sick. And now, cut to now, I am just ending my recent battle with COVID. My brain is a little foggy. And so if I do stutter or sneeze or snort, or you feel me just this has been happening and Kendra has been laughing at me, where I will just stare off into space and not say anything. She'll be like,
Yeah.
"Are you okay? What are you doing?" And I'm like,
Should we have a
"Oh,
code word for that?
yeah." I'll just, if I tap my nose or something, but anyway,
Did you
uh
ever see Team America World Police?
yes,
When he
yeah.
goes, up here, up here.
That'll be
He's
it. Maybe
waving
just
his arms right.
to those listening, if you hear Sarah snapping her fingers periodically, that is because I have zoned off
It's not
and
me having a Fosse moment over here.
yeah, it's me
Yeah.
drooling. But
Okay.
hey, Sarah Sapora, welcome back to the podcast. This is your return. This is the sequel.
This part two.
And I had every intention of going back to that first one and listening to it to ensure that I did not ask repetitive questions or cover topics that we'd already discussed. But
Okay.
my brain broke this week and I was sick and I did none of that. So I'm just gonna roll with the new book that you got going on.
Okay, can I tell
And
everybody that in the first podcast, you spent so much time remarking on how charming I was and how you felt like we were twin souls that were being reunited, and how amazing and tall and rich and successful I am.
right.
Like, I look like Claudia Schiffer in the 90s. That's what you spent the entire podcast on last time.
I do.
Just
I
run
do
with it.
now. That rings a
Remember,
bell. Now that you
yeah.
say that, yeah. I do remember actually that we spent a lot of time discussing the like the fitness industry and plus
We
size
did.
models and shapes and body sizes and gyms and um
Yeah, you were very interested in having conversation about size inclusivity from a perspective of wanting to learn, which I had been following you and known of you for a long time, and I thought you were great. And then when it came to us having this conversation, I was like, yes, absolutely, homie, like, let's do this. Because for the frame of the reference for folks who are listening and may not be familiar with me, I am a 44-year-old plus size woman, and I am very open about my journeys and challenges with my body, what I struggle with, what I excel at, fitness, not fitness, understanding my relationship to food, doing the very, very fine, jiggly, nuanced dance between self acceptance and wanting to evolve and change and be healthier. And I'm one of those few people that really likes having those conversations. And I remember when we talked, you had such an open mind and you were just like, help me understand, because I think this is a system that I've been a part of, that I'm not, that I think I've perpetuated, and I want to grow and evolve and be different. Let's talk about it. And we did, and it was an amazing chat.
yeah, I remember it was really good and I recall still some parts of that conversation. Even I think I just got goosebumps. Um talking about a few things that were brought up. So if you were listening now but didn't listen to that one, go back and check that out. Um, but for those who are new here that are like, this is a weird way to start a podcast. Sarah sounds cool though. How do you describe yourself? Like, who are you? I know we're going to dive into your new book, which I have, which is called Soul Archaeology, a totally doable approach to creating a self-loving and liberated life. But aside from that,
Yeah.
what's your deal, Sarah?
I call myself a self love mentor, but truly my biggest passion is making self-improvement accessible to people who have felt unrepresented and marginalized in the space of self-development. I feel that at every weight, at every age, because we are all fluctuating, evolving beings as long as we are alive. This is part of the journey, right? That none of us are a before and an after. And we are all deserving of having hope to feel that we can change if we are feeling pain in some aspect of our life. And we are all deserving of feeling empowered. And I am not a therapist. I am not a fancy life coach. What I am is just a woman who is very comfortable sharing her shit in the hopes of bringing more people to the table of looking at their own shit. Because I have learned in my life that the heavier I have been, the harder it has been for me to feel like I can create change. And I spent a long time looking around for inspiration out there that wasn't focused on me losing weight, but understood that as a plus size woman, there were just different parts of my life that other people couldn't relate to or understand, right? I've always said my work is not about, it's not about fat self-love, but it is about self-love from the perspective of a woman who has been varying degrees of plus size her life. I just want more people to know that they are not broken, and that when they are laying under what feels like a mountain of shit that they are responsible for making, and when they've got one of those little Baskin and Robbins like pink sample ice cream spoons and they're just sitting there trying to like dig their way out of the shit, and when they are feeling alone, and when they are just out there looking for somebody that they can relate to, and everybody out there looks perfect and has great hair and looks young and maybe skinny and like looks like they're ticking all these boxes, and then you're just sitting around here going, all I want to do is have sex without the lights on, and I just want to not get in the pool with my kid because I hate the way I look, and I won't take photos because I don't want to be seen in them. Like, I just want everyday people who don't fall under what this definition of what it is that we're quote unquote supposed to be, to know that they are capable of feeling more. And the area that I would like to grow into is creating a niche of what I refer to as plus size personal growth, which is just personal growth that allows for the nuances of living in a larger body. My work doesn't focus on my size, but my size is what brought me to my work, because I saw there was a dramatic lack of body diversity in the world of self-improvement, and I wanted to do what I could to start to fill that space a bit. Too much, or just
Never
enough?
too much. Can we make an agreement?
Yeah.
For the next hour, that doesn't exist.
You also, I'm going to tell you a not so secret that all the men in my life know. We have all agreed that I am extra. I am not high maintenance, but I am extra as fuck. And you know what? I am okay with that. I am all right with being a little extra, because I think that means I'm playful and refreshing and fun. Like when you pour a soda and it goes at the top and you get those little fuzzy bubbles that you didn't realize were there, and then sometimes they get up your nose. I am the fuzzy bubbles that get up your nose that you didn't realize you were missing in life. Yeah.
That's just poetry.
Things that when you don't have COVID, you're going to look back and you're going to go, that's the moment this went off the rails.
I can't
This
wait
is it.
to introduce you to someone and be like, oh, this is Sarah. She's like, how do I describe her? She's like fuzzy bubbles up your nose when you have a 7-Up. Yeah.
Yeah. This was the moment that it went off the rails.
I mean, to be fair, we made it. Well, the beginning was quite off the rails, but it's been like 9-10 minutes. And
yeah,
when you were talking, that was really good. So I think having you do more of that as a strategic plan. But you remind me of this line from
Strategery. Mhm.
Strategery. Yeah. Amy Young has this line from years ago that said something like, if someone tells you you're too much of a handful, then you need to find someone that has bigger hands.
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me. I am absolutely a actively in recovery people pleaser. Um, but part of the journey for me has been like full on mourning. And I know that sounds silly, but full on mourning all of the things I could have done and experienced in my life over decades if I had just known how to be myself. Like if I had just spent all those years instead of trying to be Sarah from Chippendales or be Sarah from this or that or wear the right clothes or do the right things or blah, 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 blah. If I had just worked on being as uniquely zany and heart-centered and vulnerable and marching to my own tune, God, that would have been cool. And I just have to like look at the 20 years or however long that I didn't do that and just say, okay, it got me here. And for the second half of my life, or however long I'm here on this planet, I am not going to do that again. I am just going to embrace all of those silly, zany, vulnerable, quirky, delightful parts of me. And therefore you might not like me, and that's okay. I mean, you would have shitty taste and you would be wrong, but if you don't like me, that's fine. I'm okay. I want to say I'm okay with that, but I kind of still do really want everybody to like me. But learning how to not want everybody to like me is still absolutely part of the process. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you've touched on such an important part of that process, which a lot of people face and then avoid and then stop the growing, which is that grief required to accept and embrace all of the decisions made in the past that
Yeah.
you would do differently now, knowing what you know and being who you are, etc. But that's a hard
That's a
pill to
big part
swallow.
of my work. Yeah, that is a big, 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 big part of what I of my work for me as a human is a sort of a continuously revisiting the self-forgiveness of passage, whether it's passage of time or a lost opportunity or all those things I did when I was just trying to feel loved, like, because you think you reach a peaceful place of that, and then something happens and you're like, oh, there's a little raw spot. So how do I welcome in that process of letting that grief flow through you without over identifying with it, without letting that be you and just letting it flow through you, I think is really, really important, especially if you feel shame for shit that you've done in the past. Like I had no idea how much shame I carried for things in my past, mostly as it relates to sex, but like I had no idea how heavy that load was and how much it colored my perception of what I thought I was allowed to receive and experience in life. And so putting that down and first off confronting it was like a whole big come to Jesus moment, like a Lifetime movie Sunday special in itself. But then sort of the regular dialogue with revisiting that, it's big stuff, but it's also really beautiful. Like realizing that there could be a different way of thinking is hard, but really good stuff. Really good stuff.
Yeah, and I think one of the flip sides of that is, thank goodness it's happening now rather than next month, next year, next decade, never, right? Because as much as
Yeah.
it stings currently, delaying that out into the future means that you have potentially sacrificed or wasted more of your life to that sort of setup.
You want to hear I'm going to tell you a story years ago, because I think about it a lot. Because as a 44-year-old woman, I've never been married. I don't have kids. There's a lot I regularly sort of reconcile with that, and sort of what's my role in this life as a nurturer and a person who gives and receives love, and as an author and as somebody who so deeply wants to help other people grow. Years ago, when I was like doing all the things, I went to Tony Robbins, and it was on day 3, which if anybody has ever done UPW, day 3 is like the really fucked up day, and I won't talk about it, but it was really fucked up. And there's a lot of crying that goes on that day. Like, it's a very, very intense day. And I remember that like a woman walked up to me that I had never seen before. And she kind of like looked like Stevie Nicks, like a redhead Stevie Nicks. And she walked up to me, and I had never seen her. And out of the blue, she put her arms around me and she said, "Your life will never be a waste." And I have no idea like where that fucking came from, because, sorry, for context, in this moment, we were being asked to recall what our biggest fears about our life was, what they were. And my biggest fear, all I could hear in my head was, you wasted your life. You wasted your life. You wasted your life. You wasted your life. Whether it was because you didn't get the chance to love somebody or feel loved or whatever, that's all I could hear. And I wasn't saying it out loud, but I was thinking it. And this woman walked over to me and she said, "Your life will never be a waste." And I was like, "Who the fuck are you?" And she freaked me out. But she kissed my forehead and she walked away. And I happened to bump into her later in the parking lot. And I dropped my bags and I like pointed my finger at her. And I'm sure she thought that I was a crazy person, but I looked at her and I was like, "Who are you? And what happened? Because you weren't near me and I don't know you." And she's like, "I heard you." I know, I'm sorry, this is a very random story, but when you just said just now, coming to terms with learning hard stuff about your life and understanding where that happens in your growth and in your journey and in your path to your ultimate you, whenever I wonder if I've wasted myself, I always I always remember that God or somebody was looking out for me and wanted me to remember that I wasn't, and that I won't, and that I haven't. And even though I know that, I always think that in my mind, that random woman who had no idea who I was, who walked over to me and put her arms around me and she said, "Your life will never be a waste." And I said, "Can we talk again?" And she said, "No, I've done what I need to do." And I was like, "Okay." And I think of her all the time. Sorry, random tangent. But yeah, I think of that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That comparison trap is so real. Comparing ourselves to others, or even to just what we think we should be or what we think we should do. And one version of that for me was, I was sitting in this noodle restaurant in Bali maybe 8 years ago, and I had this overwhelming moment where, gosh, I get goosebumps again. Maybe you've had this as well, where you just know that you are exactly where you're supposed to be in life. Like, it lands just like 1,000 tons of concrete, where I'm like, I'm here and there's nowhere else I'd rather be. And I just feel so lucky. And I had that moment, and then said to a friend of mine that was sitting nearby something to the effect of, how crazy is it that we've had to go through everything we've lived, the heartbreak and the devastation and the regrets and the shame, to like get to a moment like this where you find yourself in Bali eating some perfect noodles with some loved ones and just being totally enraptured with your existence. And like, I think from that context, it just adds to what you described there, which is, it's not wasted. It's never wasted if it continues to get you somewhere. And at some
Yeah.
point, you might have a moment like I described there, in which it all just kind of makes sense, even momentarily. And from my experience, that's enough.
I am so heart open to that. About a week and a half ago, I was like going through my own book looking for quotes to pull from it, right?
I got a
And
good
I
one for you.
do you?
Yeah, on that note, I've written it
Yep.
down, page 190 and also page
Oh shit,
78.
you made it far.
Yeah, well, I didn't read from 1 to 190, but you
Oh,
gave me
okay.
some suggestions to
I did. That's
read.
right, I did. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
But sorry, I interrupted you there.
No, I had a moment and I was like, this is a book. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, this isn't even like a book with like 10 words on the page. Like, this is a book. And I sat there with a highlighter and I was like, this bitch is smart. Whoever this bitch is. And then I went back to incredible, overwhelming fear and potential existential dread. But for like that 2 seconds, I was like, you girl wrote a book, like with
Yeah.
lots of words, many words, and they're decent. So it went away. The thought fleeted
They're
and went away.
they're
But
better
yeah.
than decent, Sarah. Like I actually, I followed you for a while, but I caught myself reading this several times thinking, oh damn, like Sarah can write. Like I didn't know she had it in her. Like where did she get this talent from? But I'm going to read you actually this quote from page 190 of your book
Oh,
because
oh, yeah. Do it. Do it.
I read this like maybe 2 days ago with my
Yeah.
COVID brain, maybe
Yeah.
6 times because I was like, dang. So you're talking about the movies in your life, like the stories
Mm-hmm.
and limiting beliefs we run for ourselves. And
Right.
you said, uh, feelings don't care about the truth. They feed on whatever scares us the most.
Yeah.
And I was like, hang on, let me
Yeah.
say that again. Feelings don't care about the truth. They feed on whatever scares us the most. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's a line.
Yeah. Thank you. I think I that feels like one of those, like when you're reading it, you'd be like, oh shit, I'm gonna take a picture of that and send that to my girlfriend or whoever. Yeah. Feelings don't care about the truth. They don't give it. Truth does not have a relationship with your feelings. It is what it cares. Your feelings care about what we're scared about. The movie that we play in our mind doesn't matter whether it's real or not. It matters on what are we scared of. For context, you guys, I have this chapter 10, maybe, I don't remember. It is called The Movies in Our Mind. And it talks about how, look, let me repeat this. I'm not a therapist and I'm not a groundbreaking psychologist or anything, but what I am is somebody who will hopefully introduce something to you in a way that you haven't heard it before. So the idea of core wound work is probably very familiar to people who are going through any sort of spiritual growth or personal transformation. But it's the idea that we have one hurt or one wound or one false truth that we learned about ourselves at a certain point in time in our life, most likely in our younger years, that has therefore become the basis of our perception of self. Ideally, not ideally, probably somewhere between the ages of 5 and 12, we learned something about ourselves, most likely from a parent or from somebody else with whom we were trying to feel safe with. And we then internalize this about us. And this has become the preemptive thought that we have about our value and how we relate to the world. And the thing is that the movie in our mind does not give a fuck about whether it's real or not. It's based on what it is that we are so desperately searching for. And until we address our core wound, like our Alamo of wounds, all the other work, I mean, it can help, but until we are willing to really see this one big truth that we have carried in our life that we don't even realize is a movie and we cannot possibly fathom is bullshit because it is the only thing about ourselves that we are so certain of, there is no way for our reality to change. And that is what Jeremy is referring to here. Yeah.
Yeah. Well said. And I also have written down that the core wound gets fed and we search for proof that the wound is true. And so
Yeah.
to add on what you've described there, our core identity or our set of beliefs about who we are and how life works and how love works and how relationships work, those are all based upon interpretations from when we were very young. And those interpretations might be incorrect. And the empowering part to recognize is that beliefs are choices. And so once you've identified that core wound, you can start to play around with perspectives and healing and making different shifts in identity,
Yes,
etc.
but it's also really important to understand that it's not your fault or our fault or my fault that we've chosen the beliefs that we've chosen, right? Because they've become ingrained in our head. So for some perspective, my parents divorced when I was young, and I had a wonderful childhood. Like, I wasn't abused. Both my parents loved me. I had like a very cliche, normal, middle-class, nice Jewish girl upbringing in New York. But my parents got divorced when I was 7 or 8, and there was a great amount of uncertainty with that came. I never was told sort of what the rules were going to be. I was never told how I was going to see my dad and what that was going to look like. And I was not allowed to sort of be at his houses. I didn't spend the night there as a kid. I didn't have sleepovers. There was a lot of uncertainty in my head. And so as a 7, 8, 9-year-old, I interpreted that, because I didn't get any actual data, I interpreted that as Sarah doesn't deserve to have a place with her dad. He doesn't love her enough to want her around. That's not a feeling she's allowed to have. That's not something she gets to have. So I interpreted that as my lack. And so therefore, I spent decades of my life approaching every relationship with every man that I met from the perspective of, I don't deserve to have a home with this man. I don't deserve the affection and love of a present person. I have to love from afar, and that's the best I'm going to get. And so that lay the foundation for me to be in some really, really fucked up, dysfunctional relationships with men, when all I wanted in life was to have a home with someone. All I wanted in life, looking back at it, was to be that little girl who had a bedroom in her dad and her stepmother's house, who always had a home there and had a toothbrush there and a Swan Lake poster on the wall, and didn't have to pack up and come and go in a Gap tote bag, and didn't feel like my footprint didn't belong anywhere in that house, right? I spent years trying to heal that and change that. But of course, I was attracted to partners who perpetuated the exact same thing. So my core wound work was really about understanding that belief that I had was absolute horseshit, getting to the truth of the situation of what happened, and also allowing myself to imagine a version of my life where I was deserving of that. I never lived with a boyfriend, ever, which is a very weird thing when, like, you're in your 40s and like trying to date, and like you meet a dude like on Tinder or whatever, and you're however old you are, and you've never been married and you don't have kids, and the first thing they think is, well, what the fuck is wrong with you that you've made it to this point in time in your life and you've never been married and you don't have kids? And I would be like, nothing's wrong with me. I just made poor choices. I mean, I did not live with a partner until I was 41 years old. I had never lived with a boyfriend. And I remember, this is so silly. I remember, I'm going to cry. I remember the second date I ever had with my boyfriend, who I refer to Man Candy right now. And he was very different than anybody I'd ever met. And I remember looking at his eyes, and I remember thinking, this is a man who would make me soup if I was sick. And it was the first time I ever learned that I could physically be at home with a man. So, it took me 35 fucking years, but we finally got there. But that's your core wound work. Your core wound work is whatever this belief that you have that is so big that it literally just it colors you. And it doesn't matter how deeply you want to fight it and argue with it and how much you don't want it to be true. It doesn't give a fuck. All your core wound cares about is what scares you the most. And then it perpetuates that again and again and again and again and again until you are willing to, have a little face off with it and be like, not today, Satan. We're going to do something different. Yeah. Have we gone off the rails yet? Are we still okay?
No, I just want to offer that you are fully worthy of having someone make you soup when you're sick. And like, that was just such a tender story. I love that as just a real tangible manifestation of what that belief might look like. Right.
Yeah. I mean, listen, if you come across this book and you decide to get it, what you have to know is that this book is going to hold no punches, and it will lay my shame and my ick and the things that are very hard for me very bare, because that's the only currency that I have with you. The only currency that I have is for me to say, okay, so when I was in my late 20s, I fell in love and I thought everything was going to be perfect and awesome. And it was my dream situation. And I moved across the country to be with a man who turned out to be married when I got there. And not only that, I spent however long after that trying to be better and thinner and sweeter and nicer and more agreeable so that we could be together. And who does that make me? And I don't like the person that makes me. And knowing that I relocated for somebody that would never have brought me soup because they never saw me, never saw them, like literally never saw, like maybe spent 2 nights together with this person after I relocated for them. So like the amount of self-forgiveness that I have had to offer myself for looking at these really icky ways that I self-abandoned when I was really just trying to be loved, I've just had to offer myself forgiveness and just say, okay, it was the best I knew how to do then. It was the best I had. And now I can do something different.
I'd love to dive more into that idea of self-abandonment, because it seems to be a recurring thread that runs throughout your book.
Yeah.
I think it touches on what you described previously as that core wound. And it seems like the thing that you worked through in order to get where you are now.
Right.
Does that make sense? And I don't think I've done an episode specifically around this topic, although of course we've danced around it in terms of self-love, acceptance, boundaries, all the rest. But was there like a single defining moment where you were like, maybe it's rock bottom, where you're like, look at yourself in the mirror and like, okay, I'm done with this shit. I'm going to try something different now. Like, how did you get from the person chasing a married man across the country to now living with someone called Man Candy and writing a book and being who you are?
Yeah. Well, to clarify, I didn't know he was married when I moved cross country because I would like to think that I would not have done that.
Gotcha.
I did not know that he was married until I showed up in Kentucky. That was a surprise. That was like a really great welcome present. It was like, surprise. Yeah.
But then
so
you
is
said
it okay?
You pursued him, right? After though.
Well, yeah. So it was more like, we're separated, this is ending and this is over and it's happening. Just hang out and be patient.
Right.
And
which is a very common story.
Very common story. Yep.
Yeah.
And so I would set boundaries that of course meant nothing to him because they meant nothing to me. Like, okay, well, if a change hasn't been made by this day, I cannot be in this relationship if a change doesn't happen by this time. And I walked through every promise I made to myself because I didn't have any integrity with myself. I did not have any self-trust because I had already spent however many years self-abandoning. So can I just define that for folks so that way I can put this in context, right? I'm going to be crass now, ladies and gentle homies. Self-abandoning is all the ways that we cock block our own self-love. It is the ways that we cut ourselves off from living a more self-loving life. So what I'm really saying is that when we self-abandon, we are given an opportunity in real time to make a choice that either serves us or does not, that either has our back or does not. And for whatever reason in real time, we choose to abandon our needs in favor of usually somebody else's comfort or stasis. So for example, self-abandoning can be something like extreme perfectionism. It can be something like denying things hurt your feelings when they hurt your feelings. It can be ignoring interests that you have if your partner doesn't like them. It is basically the equivalent of being a parent and taking a kid's hand and walking down the street and then just dropping it in the middle of the street and saying, good luck crossing the rest of the way. It literally means abandoning serving yourself with the things that you need, with self-loving action and care that you deserve in favor of keeping a situation or of keeping stasis. And many people are master self-abandoners. I have been one of them, like gold medal, mostly in the context of every romantic relationship I have ever been in, because I have always put the person who I felt I needed in order to be lovable, valuable, worthy, or whatever, in order to keep them happy, whether it was denying that I wanted to be in a real relationship, whether it was denying that I was just okay being friends with somebody that I wasn't, whether it was all the times, the gajillions of times that I used like surface level intimacy in order to get that hit of I actually just exist in this planet, right? Like I have been a master self-abandoner. So the thing is, I had no idea that what I was doing was like responsible for perpetuating my own shit. Right now, of course, I had moments of clarity where I didn't recognize myself. You know, I absolutely had an extreme moment of clarity the night before I left Louisville after this. I had parted ways with this gentleman, and he ended up using drugs, and it was bad and it was ugly, and eventually he would overdose and lose his life. And I had a moment going, who the fuck am I? Like, how did I get here? That this is like the dissonance between who I probably really was and who I had let myself become. Like, you have moments of those clarity when you've done something that feels so out of character, but so fucking normal that you don't even like know your ass from your elbow. Those are moments when you see self-abandoning, but really, truly, I did not see it until I was like in my late 30s, mid-late 30s, when I finally realized that like all I wanted in life was healthy intimacy, and all I was doing was getting laid. And it would have been very easy, as it had been for so long, to say that the reason why this was happening was because of the dudes, right? Like the dudes were the reason, like, as I lovingly say, same cowboy boots, different cowboys, right? Like same situation. But I was the only one in common with every one of those situations. That was it. I was the common thread. Sure, the majority of them have facial hair and were somewhere between this height and did these things, but I was the thread. So maybe something I was doing was making this dynamic okay. That's it. That was like a huge moment for me in my soul archaeology was the realization that maybe possibly I was the common denominator in all the relationships that did not get me what I really, truly, and ultimately wanted. And if that was the case, then it was like going to be only me that could prevent forest fires. Like if this is the case, then it's going to be only me that can figure out how to do something different. So that realization was what set that path of self-discovery off. I did not realize that that was self-abandonment for years. I did not realize that that was self-abandonment for a long time. But as happens with our soul archaeology, which is why the book is named what it is, we don't learn things when we want to learn them. We learn them when we're ready to learn them. So if we get to a point in our life where something is screaming in pain and we can no longer ignore it, whether it's our romantic relationships or for me, whether I was just so frustrated and scared at the fact that I was 37 and unmarried and hadn't had kids and all my friends were going on vacations and I was getting dudes who wanted pictures of my fantastic ass, thank you, but really that's all I was getting. And that freaked me out, right? When you get to a point where you have a level of pain that you can no longer ignore, you want to fix that pain with a Band-Aid as fast as you can. You want to not be in it. You want to make that change and you want to buy that magic solution and you want to become the after as fast as you can. But unfortunately, my beautiful, lovable human beings, that is not the way it works. Because if you go for the solution, if you go for the fast after, you are feeding into that before and after of diet culture, the I am broken and now I am fixed and perfect, when really your job is to excavate your shit one layer at a time, like an archaeological dig. See what you can see when you see it. You start at the top, you look at what hurts you, you brush a layer of self-awareness off, you sit with that until you're ready to brush something off. It is a continual cycle of asking, answering, and listening. Asking myself, what is hurting me right now? Answering, this is what is hurting me right now, and then following through. And when you do that again and again, at some point in time, you'll start to uncover what your ultimate you is. And is it okay if I share two things that I think are important here for people? Okay.
No, I'd rather not. I'd rather you not try to help people with two things, Sarah.
I'm talking a lot. I'm sorry. Okay, no
You're
sorries.
a
I
guest
know.
on a podcast.
Okay. Two things. One is that I have a very specific definition of self-love. And the other is this idea of ultimate you. So let me start with our ultimate you, because this is a phrase that a lot of people use and borrow and whatever, highest self, greatest self, blah, 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 blah. Bleh. I think of our ultimate you as not being defined by our weight, our age, our boobs, our income, or anything, but our ultimate you is defined by two things. The first is our ability to be radically honest and vulnerable with ourselves. So our ability to be self-aware. So therefore, you cannot be your ultimate you when you were self-abandoning, because when you are self-abandoning, you are innately in denial and unaware, whether consciously or not consciously, of your own needs. You cannot be serving your ultimate you when you are in the process of self-abandoning. Your ultimate you is about being incredibly aware of what you are feeling, what you are hurting, what is going on. The second thing, your ultimate you is fiercely committed to serving yourself with self-love. So you have to be self-aware and committed AF to yourself. Now, this is where we get to self-love. Self-love is any thought you think or any action that you take that connects you to your ultimate you. So self-love is often the most brutal stuff that we can do, but it is the stuff that will help us brush off the most layers of our soul archaeology and reveal who it is we truly ultimately are. Because our ultimate you is not defined by all these surface level things, and our ultimate you will evolve as we evolve and age and as we move through chapters. But you cannot be your ultimate you when you are self-abandoning. And you cannot be your ultimate you when you are not serving yourself with self-love. And so to answer your question, the process of seeing how you self-abandon is a completely necessary one to reveal your ultimate you. Because until you see how, respectfully, you have gotten in the way of living a self-loving life. Now, when I say this, it's not your fault. It's not. It's okay. Doesn't matter whatever shit you did when you were trying to feel more loved or more safe. Nobody's gonna fucking blame you. And if they do, and if they judge you, that's a them problem and not a you problem. Whatever you did to feel safe and to get you to this moment, it just is. It was your brain's remarkable survival skills kicking in on your behalf based on your core wound that you learned at a very early age. But when you get to a point where that's not working for you anymore, you realize you can choose a different path. Instead of self-abandoning as your core tenet in life, you can choose self-love. Instead of saying, I am going to subconsciously or consciously ignore my needs, and that is going to dictate every choice I make or every relationship I make, you can either choose to live a self-loving life or not. And when you choose to live a self-loving life, you are choosing the path of creating your ultimate you. So if you know where your ultimate you thinks it wants to be, if you know where you want to go, because you don't have to know what's going to make it work, you just have to know what's hurting me right now, right? But at any given time, if you know what's on your self-love to-do list or not, you always know what your priority is. If you are aware enough about what hurts you, then you can figure out what it is you have to do in order to move away from the hurt. And as long as you prioritize that, you will always be moving in the direction of your ultimate you. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. But I have
Yeah.
a question.
Yeah.
The very first note that I have from your book says, self-love sucks and is hard.
Yeah.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah. If you spend a lot of time on social media, we have this idea that we are marketed to and sold to that self-love is about bubble baths and indulgence and doing things that make you feel good, or bending over and pinching a very natural inch of fat and saying, I love myself, right? Self-love is this idea that we are sold, and it is commercialized and turned into mostly feel-good bypassing. The majority of self-love, as I see it, can actually be really brutal and difficult. It is the gritty stuff. It is the hard stuff, but it is the stuff that connects you to your ultimate you. And sometimes the stuff that connects us to our ultimate you is really fun. Like maybe you love crochet and needlepoint, and there is nothing more peaceful and exciting to you than putting on reruns of I Love Lucy and sitting there and crocheting. And when you do that, you are connecting to yourself and you're serving yourself and you're doing all these wonderful things. But maybe the most self-loving thing that you can do is walk away from a relationship that held every hope and every dream that you imagined would lead to the PTA and lead to cupcakes with a 6'3" man who you think is Superman, who you move cross country to be with, and who you love with every fiber of your being, but will never give you what you need. And so self-love, if it serves you, can sometimes be awesome, but it can also be incredibly difficult. And more often than not, real, true, radical self-love is the icky, sticky stuff that makes for terrible social media, right? It is really about looking at what it is that you need, not what somebody else needs, but what do you truly need to unfurl into you. And, you know, it could be something sucky like walking away from a relationship, or having to come to terms with your health and your weight and your body, or working through eating disorder, or working through addiction. Or it can, self-love can be something like, I am at my most peaceful when I see a waterfall and I get outside, right? Whatever is going to connect you to your higher self your ultimate you is self-love. But ultimately, a lot of times, self-love fucking sucks. It just does. It just, but if you go through life, my God, this is going to be so dirty, but you know me, and I haven't made a dirty joke yet. So I'm really surprised that we made it as long as we have without making a dirty joke. If you go through life trying not to suck, it's going to increase the suck. If you go through life trying to avoid sucky, hard things, you will make your life more hard inevitably at some point in time. The key in life is to just sort of acknowledge that sucky, shitty, hard things just happen and they're a part of life and they're not you. They're not because of you. It's not because of me right now that I'm dealing with this book launch and my father is incredibly not great. That's a sucky thing, man. That is a sucky, hard thing. And it is sucky and hard. And there is a lot of my book that is about stuff with my dad. And it's sucky and hard to realize that this all feels very spiritual and timely and blah, blah, blah. That shit's not about me. That's just a part of life, man. Sucky things are a part of life. So if you just realize that, and you realize that you're not promised comfort, and you can choose, do you want to go through your life focused more on comfort or focused more on expansion? And both are viable. There are many people who go through life and they're not interested in digging deeper. And you know what? Bless their hearts. That's totally okay. But if something hurts and you don't know why, and it's really starting to get under your skin, then you got to do some digging. And you might have to welcome in some self-love that really sucks a big one.
Yeah. I got distracted there by that last sentence when you said self-love
Sucks
really
a big one.
sucks a big one. Yeah, I had I was well prepared with a follow-up question. I had my professional brain going, and then you dropped that at the end and completely
You want to know
derailed
what?
me.
That happens. You're welcome.
Thank you.
That's actually one of my gifts, is making things weird. Right? Man Candy likes to say that one of my gifts is making things weird, and I'm okay with this. And it is also like a fall from grace moment when I run retreats or events, and all of a sudden the women go, "Oh, she has got a dirty mouth." Now, if they're keen, they've figured that out already. But every now and then there's one person who gets really mad that I have such a filthy sense of humor, and they feel like betrayed and angry at me. And I'm like, that sounds like a you thing and not a me thing. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, but okay, going back to what you just said though,
Yeah,
this idea of self-abandonment and self-awareness being crucial to understanding and enhancing your own ability to love yourself through that. I think
yeah,
you just shared something tender, which is, hey, I'm in a book launch. I'm stressed out. It's a lot. My
yeah,
dad is not doing great, and I'm
right.
feeling blank. I'm feeling scared. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling like life is hard right now. Like, that is a tremendous act of self-love, to just admit however it is that you're feeling at any given moment. And that to me is part of what you described as like sucking a big one, is just like admitting like, yeah, this is really fucking hard right now, and I'm scared, and
Yeah,
I don't know what to do, and I don't know what's going to happen, and I need help. Like, that's a
yeah.
beautiful act of self-love.
Thank you. And I like to think that that's a moment where I'm embodying what I try and teach other people, because I have two choices right now. I can fulfill this magical role of, perfect author with all of her perfect social media graphics and my perfect book launch, or I can turn around and I can tell you, today I cried so hard that I blew my nose in a clean maxi pad and it sucked. And you want me to give you book endorsements and things, but I want to tell you that right now I am just really aware that my dad is probably not going to be around much longer, and that is heavy. And I have two choices. I can either ignore that, or I can just let that feeling flow through me. I don't want to over-identify with the pain, because that's also self-abandoning. That's also not fair to me. But I choose to show up radically vulnerable in my life, because I know that that radical vulnerability makes me fiercely strong. And if people choose to see that as being messy and imperfect and not the experience that they want to have, then that's fine. But a great deal of life is defined by our ability to handle death and birth and beauty and pain and hope and despair at the same time. And if we wait for life to give us those emotions cleanly, one at a time, then, I mean, yeah, we're in for something not fun with that, because, I mean, it's incredibly, sorry, it's incredibly spiritual that a book that is really written based on core wound stuff that has everything to do with my dad, that I've worked so very hard to heal through, and have gotten to a place, if you get to the end and the epilogue, where you see my dad and I have a moment of healing together. It is not lost on me now that these moments are colliding. And so I can either, I can be angry about that, which part of me is, but I can also just feel very lucky and grateful that I had the healing moments that I have had, and that I know that my dad is proud of me. So life is not delivered to us in neatly packaged Tupperware containers. Sometimes life, God just gives us the shit and says, get comfortable here, you know? And so I learned today that my dad is going in for another surgery, and that he's not going to be at my book launch party, which was hard. And I don't want to be ego driven, but he was so proud to be there. So I apologize, listeners, but what I'm saying is that your ability to get very comfortable when life throws us every contradiction of darkness and lightness at the same time is what I think makes for tenacity. The ability to experience that annihilation comes hand in hand with truly unbreakable love in whatever form is not a pretty lesson to learn, but it is life. And so you can either self-abandon and anesthetize and cover up those hard feelings, or you can just say, it is what it is. And if it is what it is, it just is. I mean, literally, it just is. It doesn't have to be karmic. It doesn't have to be whatever. It literally just is. And then just say, okay, we're here. What's next? You know, and then you do it until the feelings come up again, and you feel them and you let them through, and then you blow your nose on a clean maxi pad or on your sleeve or whatever you have, and then you turn around and you show up for a podcast with a dude who you promised you were going to be professional BFFs with, and he's recovering from COVID and probably thinks you're fucking crazy, but maybe there's some woman who's listening right now who kind of feels seen. And so we did our job, right? Because we didn't mask and we didn't hide. We showed up. And that's how you have to get through it, right? That is the suckiness of self-love that also makes you unbreakable and unshakable, right? They go hand in hand.
I feel like we just went on a soul archaeology dig together. feel like Indiana Jones right now.
Yeah, yeah. I start, I think whatever chapter, whatever it is that I tell people, like, imagine that I'm Angelina Jolie in Tomb Raider, except I'm fat and I have chub rub and boob sweat. That's what this is like. I am your guide with the shorts and the whip, and my breasts never hit gravity, but we're going to now excavate your shit. That's soul archaeology. It's excavating your shit one layer at a time until what is unshakably true about you is revealed. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it. And what you described there is this idea that I love in the way that I frame it in my own mind, which is to not chase happiness, but rather to allow wholeness. And I think in that allowing of wholeness, the emotions, the feelings, the desires, all of it, you're demonstrating yourself there that that you're not abandoning your feelings, you're not abandoning your emotions, you're turning towards those sensations, you're turning towards those feelings, those disappointments, all of it, right? And I think that's a really loving act, to allow yourself to just be.
Yeah, that's the choice, to self-abandon or self-love, right? You only have two choices in life. When you're faced with a challenge, do you have your own back or do you not? And don't think for 1 minute that having your back needs to be pretty or perfect or performative in any way. And don't think for any moment that self-abandoning looks ugly, right? Sometimes you can be chipping away at your self-esteem with an ice pick and having a picture that goes viral on social media because everybody thinks your shit's perfect, right? Don't make a judgment about either one of those, because really at the end of the day is, are you choosing to serve yourself or are you not? That's it. And it doesn't have to be selfish, by the way. Serving yourself doesn't mean you don't allow for others and make room for them and care for them and nurture them and fuel into them. It just means that you don't do it at the expense of handing your agency over to someone else to mold like silly putty.
Well, this feels like a solid spot to end on. I could
I
talk
feel
to you.
I know, but I feel like I'm really like a bummer right now. Do you have any like good jokes, or should we sing something, or like, I don't know.
Can I just add from my perspective that
Yeah.
I don't think that you're crazy. I think that you're wise. And I don't feel like you're a bummer right now. I feel like you're beautiful right now. I feel like you're demonstrating what self-love means. And I feel like you're honoring yourself in the biggest way possible. And in that sense, you are extremely professional and you're a wonderful podcast guest. And I don't think that we need a song or a dance routine to sugarcoat any of that. I think you're wonderful. I think you're great. And this has been a real honor to see you walk in the talk, you know?
Thank you. Thank you for making room for me. You know, I appreciate you. And one day we're going to hug it out.
But I do have a joke for you.
Yeah. Is it a good one?
No.
Oh. Okay, go ahead.
So a couple weeks ago, I was doing this big walk in Spain on the Camino. I guide this thing every year. It's 200 kilometers, and we were over a bridge.
So freaking cool looking. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And we were over a bridge, and we were looking down, and there was all these fish swimming below the bridge. And I turned to one of the ladies on the walk, and I said, "Do you know what you call a fish with no eyes?" She was perplexed for a moment, and so I repeated myself. "Do you know what you call a fish with no eyes?" And she's like, "No, what?" And I said,
Yeah.
"Get it?"
I do. That was good.
Anyway.
Wait, I do want to, I won't say what interview I did recently, but that interview ended with a promise to Jello wrestle. I know, right? It was, I mean, not in a dirty way, because I
revealed our interview.
No. If you joked about Jello wrestling, you don't think I would remind you? at some point in time. When I was younger and I worked for Chippendales, I was at a convention once with a couple of my dudes, and a woman came over to me and asked me if I would be her Jello wrestling partner at a very famous strip club here. And the dudes were like, do it. And I was like, well, what color Jello? Because in my head, apparently that made a difference. If it was like orange or yellow Jello, it wouldn't look good on my skin tone. But if it was like blue raspberry, then maybe I would consider. I sadly did not Jello wrestle. But on that note, I loved your stoke just as much. No, actually, it's very punny.
Thanks, Sarah. But back to professional podcast mode. You have a book out called Soul Archaeology.
I do.
I've read, I don't know, maybe an eighth of it. I think it's outstanding. I think your voice is unique and it's really well done. But I know that you have also an Instagram account that I follow that's really good. But are there other places that you want to direct people's time and attention?
Truthfully, anything that would be in my world would be on my website, which is just sarahsapora.com. When I get through this book stuff, I am going to be working on a 30-minute podcast where I do little snippets of self-love that we can digest in 30 minutes or less. And if the book goes well and I get to write a second book, I want to explore the dynamic between mothers and daughters and self-esteem and weight. And I will just be here holding down the fort for these uncomfortable yet incredibly necessary conversations for people who want to create more in their life.
Will you remind me what you call your in-person retreats? There's like a funny name, right?
Yeah, I do. I have a very specific type of retreat that I call a va-treat, which most people think is a vagina treat. And I don't stop them from thinking that because, again, I like all sorts of innuendo. But the va-treat is a vacation/retreat. It's a combination of like we're somewhere tropical and we're going on vacation, but it's also a retreat, which means I'm not going to force you to like drink green juice. We're going to have beach time and soul stuff. So I call them va-treats.
Gotcha.
Not vagina treats.
Well, see, that's funny, and your description is so great because I clearly remembered it as something related to like vagina retreats.
Of course you did.
Yeah. Perhaps because you cleverly marketed it.
Well, I came up with a tagline for my work recently. I called it Powered by Self-Love. And then I had to pull all of my friends and ask them if they thought that was too masturbatey, just masturbatey enough to be genius, or they didn't give a fuck. And a couple of them were like, that is very masturbatey. And then a couple of them were like, it's just enough masturbatey for it to absolutely be you. And then they're like, yeah, but it also makes a lot of sense. So I figured, fuck it, go with it. So the tagline that I use is powered by self-love. It's life powered by self-love. But I guess to some people, I don't know who those people with incredibly dirty minds would be, the same people that think the treat stands for vagina treat.
Yeah. Yeah, those people.
Those people. Yeah.
Well, hey, thanks again for being
Sorry.
On that vagina treat note, Sarah, and the Jello wrestling visual, and your powerful share, just thanks for being all of you and for doing the work that you do. I know that it matters. I know that I personally have taken a lot from it, and I'm excited to see what's next for you. So, please do keep me in mind if I can support or assist. Let me know. I'm here. I just think you're fucking great.
I adore you. You know that, right? I adore you.
I know that.
Yeah. Boom, double blow it up. Yeah, we're totally gonna hang out in real life. It'll be
Remind
awesome.
me what state you live in?
I live in Las Vegas, but I will probably be leaving soon at some point in time, and I don't know, I'm portable. I'm all over. I'm every woman. It's all in me. No, who knows where I'll be. You never know.
Well, our paths will cross one day, and it will be surprising and delightful, I'm sure.
I mean, it's me. Of course it'll be surprising. You know what it'll be like? It'll be like those little bubbles that come when you that up your nose.
Yep, that's what it'll be like.
God damn it. Like you saw your professionalism going down the drain and you're like, there's
Right?
nothing I can
No,
do,
it's
but it's,
funny because right when you said, you know, it's like in my brain, I was like,
you
oh
knew
no,
it.
she's gonna go with the bubbles. She's gonna do the
Yeah,
nose bubbles thing.
yeah,
But
I
you
did.
brought it full circle.
What
Appreciate you.
happened? I adore you. Thank you so much. And thank you
Yeah.
to everybody for listening. I adore you. And I hope that I can cross paths with you in some way too. So thank you very much, Jeremy.